Well, if you were with us on the evening of the U.S. presidential election, you'll remember our key commentator that night was our friend Ben Weingarten of The Federalist. And there were moments that night where I allowed my heart to hope when the results in key states, whether it was Georgia or Pennsylvania, showed that Donald Trump was set to win. And then strange things started to happen, including vote counting being stopped, huge caches of votes being found. You're not allowed to talk about that or you'll be deplatformed by the social media companies. But that was the last time we had a long chat with Ben. We've talked to him a couple times since, but I'm delighted to say that Ben has a new show, and the pilot episode was just released. He calls his show Bad News. And I'm depressed just hearing the title, but joining us now via Skype is Bad News Benjamin. Ben, how you doing?
Ezra, I'm well, and while I know it sort of has a negative connotation to it, I promise it'll be entertaining, enjoyable, and if the world is burning down around us, at least we'll be able to have a few laughs about it.
Well, I want to say thanks again for you staying up super late with us that night on election night, and there was that moment. I remember we looked at how betting futures were looking and how the stock market was looking. There was maybe an hour there where things looked like he might pull it off, but alas. Now, I think that bad news is sort of a pun, isn't it? You're not saying, hey guys, I've got bad news. Is it more a media criticism? You're calling the mainstream media, oh, that news? No, that's bad. That's you can't rely on it. It's another way of saying like unreliable news, or the news itself, the news media is bad. Am I right in understanding the hidden meaning in your new show's title?
Yeah, it's at least a double entendre, maybe a triple entendre. And we had, of course, considered fake news as one potential show, but I think this captures really the entirety of it, which is that it's not just the substance of what our bettors in the corporate media are portraying, but it is actually as well their sort of malign ends. And I think sort of the meta narrative, at least that from my perspective, that governs the show, and my co-host Emily Jashinsky has her own view on this as well. My view is that the corporate media has essentially become the communications arm of the ruling class. It is part of the ruling class. It's not adversarial to it. It's an accessory of it. It doesn't question the powerful. It has become the mouthpiece for the powerful. And so what we hope to do with this show is to expose it every single day.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, I often noted that one of the most beautiful women in the world, Melania Trump, never was on a single cover of a women's magazine, a fashion magazine. Michelle Obama, and I'm not going to criticize her looks, but she was on the cover of dozens, maybe hundreds of women's magazines, fashions magazines, but not Melania, an actual model. There was an obvious tactic of taking, let's say, 100 photographs of Melania and capturing the one where she wasn't smiling. So at the very least, it made her less attractive, and at most it would imply, oh, she's not happy with Donald Trump either. And I mention all that because that kind of coverage, which we had for 4 years, has been replaced with absolute hagiographies, absolute fangirl, fanboy love letters. It's just incredible. And I think they're counting on most people not to notice the 180-degree change.
Yeah, and in the process, I think they're really discrediting themselves for anyone who goes in with eyes open and looks at the media. And I grant, rightfully so, the American people overwhelmingly do not trust the media with writ large, with good reason. And it's in no small part because this is a media that, remember, said that the only scandal in the Obama administration was the fact that he wore a tan suit to a press conference once. They're simply, on one level, they're unserious. On another level, they are deathly serious about protecting and preserving the power of the people whose narratives they spin and propagate to the world. They want to maintain access to the powerful. They want to be accepted at all the cool cocktail parties in DC, New York, LA, and around the country. But ultimately, the American people suffer it as they foist effectively these information operations on us that are all about, again, keeping the powerful in power. There was a time where there truly was at least some percentage of the media that was adversarial. And of course, there are always self-interested people in media who are not going to pursue hard-hitting stories. They're just going to try to curry favor with those in the political class and the business world and beyond. But now everyone is on the same team. And as a consequence, truth really does die. Democracy really does die in darkness, as the Washington Post likes to tell us. But they've been engaging in projection over it for the last 4 years. What we're seeing right now is real state media.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You know, I'm not, what's Joe Biden? Is Joe Biden 78, if I'm not mistaken? Mm-hmm. I'm 48, so he's got 30 years on me. And I find myself sometimes pausing for 1 second before we're calling a name that, you know, probably 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had a second's pause. And I mention that because we all get old and we all get a little bit more forgetful. But I remember when Donald Trump would host 1 2-hour-long press conferences, especially in the early days of the pandemic, he would seriously stand there for an hour or 90 minutes, fielding questions from the most adversarial, like he kept calling on his haters. It's not like, I mean, he expressed his antipathy towards them, but he never stopped calling on Jim Acosta of CNN, for example. He just never stopped. And the point I'm making now is he always called them by name, or at least quite often. There was no doubt that Trump was fully in command of his faculties, and he would remember the names of at least the leading lights. One tiny change that I think shows so much is that Joe Biden is not the one calling the reporters by name. He has an assistant there, a staffer, who calls them by name. And I really think, Ben, it's because Joe Biden doesn't remember the names. Maybe doesn't even remember who they are at all. Now, maybe I'm focusing on a tiny, minute point, but just like the Melania Trump was never on a magazine cover, talking about a press aide calling people by name shows that we have a president of a much lower cognitive level. His staff are covering it up and the media are going along with it. There was a question the other day about Biden and Putin, and Biden's answer was chippy and chirpy and angry. If Trump would have had such an answer, it would have never been accepted for a heartbeat. You can see it in the little things as much as the big things.
When does the Russian collusion investigation get started when it comes to Joe and Hunter and the rest of the merry Biden corrupt band? Look, I think that your point is very well taken, that sometimes these little insights have very big substantive significance. And you simply have to ask the question, look, at every single turn in the Biden quote unquote campaign, and I say that because it was essentially like a 19th century campaign run from his porch, except just in his basement via Zoom, at every point it has been a hermetically sealed campaigner and then president-elect and now president. And the archetype, or if you wanted to describe kind of what the prototypical Biden press conference, if you can even call it that, looks like today, it's about 10 minutes of prepared remarks, 5 minutes of which they're actually intelligible, and the rest is sort of gobbledygook. One person asks a question, he says, "Come on, man," in response, and then his team shoos everyone out of the room. So he never takes a question. Everything is staged, managed. It's all prepared. Like you said, he's not the one calling the reporters by name. Can he handle being pushed under questioning? Unclear. Are they protecting him because it'd be embarrassing if he was able to go off script? That's probably an element of it as well. But I actually think a couple media sources have dropped the mask a little bit on this, and I believe Politico and maybe The Hill as well have at least quoted unnamed Democratic sources who have said, look, there's real concern about can Joe Biden handle a 20-minute Rose Garden press conference, and going back and forth, jousting with the press. The fact that that's even being leaked out and filtered into publications, to me, indicates that while Joe Biden is being treated as God incarnated today by the media, it's very clear that they are paving a path where down the road they may push him aside, essentially, in some sort of semi-dignified fashion. And there's been some talk out there about the fact that if you look at the Constitution, a vice president could technically serve 10 years. If Joe Biden served as president 2 years and 1 day and then stepped down and Kamala Harris assumed the seat, she could then run for the next 2 consecutive terms and potentially be president for 10 years. So I think it's something to keep in mind as we watch the media engage in the hagiography, as you so aptly describe it. Let's see over time how much the questions of fitness, mental acuity, health, and the like start to filter through the narratives. I'm not saying that it's going to be the dominant part of media coverage because it's a love affair for now and for the foreseeable future. But there's also a love affair going with Kamala Harris as well. And so I suspect as time goes on, you'll see this transition from Biden to Harris in what he's referred to inaptly as the Harris Biden, or maybe aptly as the Harris Biden administration a couple of times.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.